Hello and welcome. We are here to talk all about the MBTA Communities Act, otherwise known as 3A. My name is Diana Viens.
And I'm Vasili Mallios, and we are concerned citizens that have learned in the last couple months about the MBTA Communities Act. As like Diana said, we'll mention it as 3A.
Mm-hmm. And if we go to the next slide, we will talk about the basics of 3A. So 3A started off as a 3-paragraph law under the Baker administration. It addressed 3 grants that the 177 communities that are subject to this act may not be eligible if they didn't comply. It's since transformed into 13 additional grants on top of that through the Healy administration. She's really taken it to the max, and now she's suing towns. So we'll maybe hit on that, maybe not, but just for your own purposes, it's extended beyond its original form for sure. Winthrop is one of the 177 towns that's subject to this law, and by the map, you might think you're looking at New Jersey, but unfortunately, these are the cherry-picked towns and cities that are subject to 3A.
And Diana, if you look at the map, there are some blobs, some empty spaces that don't actually have to comply, and one of those is the city of Boston.
City of Boston.
Okay, the hub of where the MBTA meets doesn't have to comply with 3A, along with the Cape, right?
Cape,
Martha's
right.
Vineyard. There's some other blobs, and if you notice, all of Western Mass doesn't need to comply with 3A.
Right.
I just want to touch on one other point. You had mentioned that in 2021, Governor Baker had signed this into law, but it actually started before that. And from my research, the ground of this law started in a bill, Bill 1290, which was actually co-authored and signed by our Senator Joe Boncory at the time. Yeah. And so if you read that bill, the root of the MBTA law is right there in writing for us. And it was then placed into a bill 5250, 100-page bill. It was 3 paragraphs. It was stuck in there, and that was in 2021 when Charlie Baker signed it.
Yeah, very, very unfortunate. And pre-COVID started, as you mentioned, started in 2020.
And times have obviously changed.
Very much so. Okay. So seemingly small, has obviously grown in weight. And if we go to the next slide, we'll talk about why that doesn't really make sense here in Winthrop. The bottom line is this law is not in Winthrop's best interest. We have a great system here. I think in the past we full transparency may have taken it for granted, but now the thought of taking away our rights and our ability to have input is on the table. We're reflecting pretty hard on what we have today and how grateful we are for our Zoning Board of Appeals and our Planning Board, who really truly evaluate development projects and proposals before they're implemented. The reason being, especially in a place like Winthrop, anything we do here is going to affect a lot of people because we are so dense, we're so tightly packed in. One of the things I really appreciate and have taken full advantage of myself about our system today is that it allows for public input. 3A is a bypass of public input. What I didn't mention on the previous slide is that the thing that makes 3A so odd, it talks about multifamily housing, but what it actually is, if you read the letter of the law, is a free pass to stuff as many bedrooms in a single unit as humanly possible. There can be no minimum bedroom size. There can be no maximum number of bedrooms.
And Diana, going back to 3A, the state is telling us kind of what to do, sort of, but the people that know their communities best are the ones that live here.
Absolutely.
I don't think the governor has come through our town. The senator makes a couple of appearances. I know Representative Turco resides in Winthrop, and that's really important. We know our community the best. We should be able to make those decisions based off of our surroundings and not something that's being a one-size-fits-all mandate from the state.
Right. Yeah, and local government is really, truly the most democratic form of government. It allows us to have a say. It allows us to have input in things like this. So, yeah, I think we've built a lot in addition to what the state is suggesting that we should build more of. If the state were suggesting that we should build more of what we have today, then they wouldn't be pushing so hard on this sort of oddball law.
And Diane, it's evident as you walk through or drive through town, you can see that we have been developing. We've been developing responsibly. We've been developing based off of, like I'd said, what we feel is best for our town. You can look at one of the greatest change that we've had in the last couple of years, the Center Business District, the CBD, rezoned. There was a development there with the Somerset 28 units. We're doing it responsibly, and that's the most important thing. And we're actually doing it at our pace as well. What we can handle as a community, the infrastructure, the schools, safety. We're looking at those numbers, and we're able to accommodate what we can at that time. There's a list of developments: Somerset Ave, Herman Street, Tileston Road, Pleasant Street. If you drive next to the fire station heading down to the point, there was a redevelopment there. So we are doing it. We've been doing it, and now 3A would say you need to do more on top of what you're already doing.
Right. And what's interesting, I just remember this, we talk about the reason for 3A, right? The whole premise is based on this crisis, this housing crisis. If it was a crisis of missing housing or needed housing, why wouldn't we include Boston, especially around transit? When
Very
Boston
true.
doesn't have a train, they have a train system. Winthrop is tied to 3A because we are near a train that is an exempt
Orion
Boston.
Heights.
Exactly.
Orion Heights is exempt.
Right.
And that's how we're tied.
It's amazing. Okay, if we go into the next slide, please.
So Diana, 3A gives us a quota.
Right,
Exactly. What is that quota that we need to zone for?
Yep. Yeah, so fascinating, this one-size-fits-all discussion, right? Because it truly is. It's based on a calculation of existing housing stock, and then whatever category you're given, and whether that's adjacent to community, it's a percentage based on the category and your existing housing stock. So we are adjacent community. That means we have to zone for 10% of our existing housing
Gotcha.
stock. That means another 882 units.
Wow,
Yeah.
882, and that's the minimum.
That's the minimum.
Okay.
That has to be within 12 acres. That's the span of land we were designed for. So in addition to the no minimum bedroom size, no maximum number of bedrooms, we have to have a big chunk of land because the types of housing that the state is looking to put in are very well suited for big chunks of land. So we can break up that 12 acres into essentially two zones. One of them has to be a minimum of 6 acres, and then the minimum after that has to be 5 acres.
Okay.
So in any case, it ends up being a big chunk of land,
Gotcha.
lots of bedrooms, and you might think that has to be new development. You think the classic example of a developer goes to house A and says, hey, you have a lot of land and a single family home, and I can build a lot more stuff here and make some money. I'm going to pay you a little over asking, maybe a lot over asking.
Right.
The next home is then stuck with whatever, or taking the next best offer,
Right.
and so on.
So I just purchased a single-family home here in Winthrop in a quiet neighborhood that's surrounded by single families, duplexes. As you go further down, there are a couple of triple-deckers. If my area of town is zoned for 3A, that would open it up to, let's just say, 3 stories. As if my neighbor decides to sell and a developer comes in, right, they could put 3 stories there, as many units as they feel would fit, and then as many bedrooms in each unit. I would not be happy as a neighbor in a single family residential area with duplexes, something that I'm pretty comfortable seeing. I don't want to be able, and it's a ranch style home, so it's single floor. I don't want to be able to come out of my door and say, whoa, my neighbors are right there,
Right.
and there's no restriction on occupancy, correct?
Exactly right. Yeah.
So, you put these boxy style three-story apartment style complexes. They're not 3 units. Multifamily per the law is 3+ units, and a developer is going to try and get as much as they can on
Right.
that lot of land. So, it turns into a single family home turns into a multifamily with X amount of units.
Right.
Where are the people going to be parking?
Yeah.
I don't believe there's any requirements for cars, for parking. I can tell you we own 2 cars. We can comfortably put them in our driveway, maybe put one out on the street. But if we're going to start seeing apartment-style complexes in neighborhoods, we're going to see a lot of congestion, and we're going to see a lot more cars parked on the street.
Right, exactly. And 3A says that you can't require anything else or on top of what's already there based on however we have it today, unit size, et cetera. And keep in mind, this doesn't just apply to new buildings, new construction. So the second you put a 3A overlay on a neighborhood,
Okay.
That gives developers a license to, whatever they purchase, to cut that up into multiple bedrooms, really. A single unit that had maybe 2 bedrooms or 1 bedroom
Right.
previously can now have 6 or 7, et cetera, however many can fit in there, and no minimum bedroom
So
size.
you could take a triple decker, you could cut that into 6 units, and in 6 units you put 2 bedrooms.
Exactly.
I mean, that's a possibility. We've actually seen that in town. One other thing I'd like to mention as far as the law goes is that, let's just say we have an acre of land, and that's really scarce here in Winthrop, but if we compare to an acre of land, under our current zoning, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, you could fit 3 duplexes on an acre of land here in Winthrop, okay? Under 3A, it's a minimum of 15 units on an acre.
That's
Is that
right.
correct?
That's right. That's what the density quota. That's where the density quota comes in, and that does have. I'm glad you raised that, because that initial calculation has nothing to do with how much land is in here. The 1.6 square miles. It has nothing to do with what's already here. It has everything to do with just the existing housing stock, and our percentage based on the category that we were provided.
So a scenario that I can see is, everyone says, oh, we're not going to sell. Well, if a developer comes and knocks on your door and says, hey, I'm going to ask you over asking and I'm going to offer you cash, right? It sounds a pretty good deal, right? You may take it, you may not. But if you do take that deal, right, now that developer comes in, next door neighbor sees that a 3A apartment complex goes up and says, I don't want to live next to this. I'm going to now sell it. But I heard that my neighbor, got over asking. I'm going to go to that developer. And that developer is going to start going down the line. And then what happens, those lots can be combined, right?
Absolutely.
And then they can really develop almost a whole block. I mean, Shirley Street had been mentioned. All the side streets have been mentioned with
it
the
would change
U-tile.
that area immensely.
With the U-tile consultant in the beginning phases. I could just picture those triple deckers being redeveloped into a mini Revere Beach scenario here. And that's very concerning.
Yeah, and it's common. It's more common than people realize. If we go to the next slide, here's an example actually of what you're kind of talking about. In the picture is a 4/1. You'll see 5/1s, but essentially the first floor is a concrete floor, and then the rest of it's pretty not great materials. Lots of people complain moving into these types of structures that you can hear through the walls and things like that. But this would become commonplace. You don't see this in Winthrop today, but you would under 3A, because that's exactly what would happen, unfortunately.
But just be aware, we're not, the height would probably be about three stories.
In most residential
areas.
units.
I believe the CBD can go a little bit
4,
higher, 3.5, 4. But in residential areas, 3 would be the height
Right.
that you'd be looking at.
Yeah, and we have exceptions to that. And here's the thing about our local process. You know, you mentioned 65% multifamily housing. That's because our zoning board of appeals, our planning board has taken the time to look through these and said, yes, that makes sense within your area. Your neighbors are cool with that. And I can say that my neighborhood, my street is at least half multifamily like we think of them today.
Yeah, duplexes,
Exactly.
triples.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So why would the state need a law to make more of what we already are making, right? You have to think about that. And it's because of this unlimited occupancy. They're just trying to stuff as many people as they can in there, and then why that, right? Why
Increased density. I mean, that's the key behind this.
Right.
To increase density, to cram people in.
Right. And why that? You know, we could take it a step further. Buildings are, commercial spaces emptying out in Boston. Boston is really in big trouble. The T is in big trouble, okay? Like, these are things that prop up the city of Boston, and they are the cornerstone of the economic basis of what makes Boston, you know, able to exist.
Right.
So I think at the end of the day, I don't want to be conspiracy theory, but it appears that we are a prop to save Boston.
Well, I mean, there's 177 communities that were selected for this arbitrarily.
Exactly. Arbitrarily.
And, you know, they all fall along the MBTA.
Right, except
MBTA
Boston.
lines, except Boston. So very interesting fact
Very
behind that. But I
interesting.
agree, we won't get into the conspiracy theory.
Right.
But, you know, just to put that out there, right?
Exactly. But I want to hear from you about Winthrop and why specifically this is sort of a not great fit for our town. If you go to the next slide.
Absolutely. So Winthrop is 1.6 square miles. Now, the state actually had us down at 1.9 miles. And thankfully, our former town council president, Tom Riley, had brought that to the attention of the town council, because the state was actually including our 0.3 acres that that Massport and Logan Airport use. So Winthrop is 1.6 square miles. And within that 1.6 square miles, our current population density is defined a little over 12,000 people per square mile. So, I mean, we're cramped.
We are cramped.
We're cramped. We live right on top of each other. You know, I love seeing my neighbors every single day. I do, but
Out your window.
out my window in my backyard. You know. So just think about this. We're cramped enough as it is, and we want to throw more, and more,
Right.
and more in, and we have been developing responsibly in the past, and so 3A is just a little unrealistic for Winthrop.
Right.
One other thing that you had mentioned is that Winthrop is made up of 65% multifamilies. That's duplexes, triples, some you'll see four or more, but not many. Which means that 36% of Winthrop houses are single-family units. The state average for single-family, 76%. We're doing our part. And it's been clear we're doing our part, but we're not doing it the way the state wants us to do it, with the style of multifamily homes. And so, you know, we're ahead of the ball here. Okay, we're doing our part, and the state needs to look at that a little bit deeper. On the next slide, you know, we have been fantastic neighbors to Massport, to the MWRA, and you know, at what point do we say, how much more can we take on from the state? We're neighbors to the MWRA. We allow their trucks to come through our town, use our roads with toxic chemicals going in and out of our neighborhoods. We experience noise pollution from Logan Airport. Not only just noise pollution, but you can assume that the waste from the jet fuel and the
Yep.
you know, so there's a lot of things that we've taken on as far as hardships go, as being great neighbors to things that everybody in the state uses. Okay, so you know, Winthrop puts ourselves out there. We do it. We help out. We're taking this on. Do we complain a couple of times about the noise? Absolutely.
Not
from
enough,
the airport.
not enough,
Not
really.
enough, but we do, right?
We do.
We do. But you know, I don't want to say we've accepted it fully, because you know, I think we could get more from them. But you know, we've done our part.
Right.
Okay, it's a hardship. We've done it.
For sure. for sure. And speaking of hardships and our one road in, one road out, right?
Oh, absolutely.
What else is coming down the pike?
So just to speak on the one way in and out, right? Winthrop, we're a peninsula, okay? One way in and out of Revere, one way in and out of East Boston. We see the traffic patterns as they are today.
Yeah.
We have seen in the past few weeks several storms, nor'easters, where flooding has been a major issue for the town. And unfortunately, during those times, the floodgates close, leaving Revere. So what happens to everybody, right? You can't leave out of Revere.
Nope.
We're all
Stuck.
detoured and rerouted out of East Boston. And everyone has experienced it. The traffic is out of control, okay? Not only just because of timing, right, or getting to your appointments or such, but that's a safety concern. If we need to get emergency vehicles in and out of town, how are they going to get through if we only have one way in and out with
Right.
the traffic? But also, our streets are pretty narrow, okay? That's a really big concern that the state needs to understand as well.
Yeah.
You know, are people going to buy a boat and start going in and out on on their boat? Everyone
we
has
need
to.
a bridge.
Everyone has to own a boat. Where are we going to have to build another, another street or another bridge that goes in and out of town? No, we can't handle that.
Right.
So storms get us really bad here, but we have to think about our neighbors as well. Suffolk Downs is going to see over 10,000 residential units. How bad is the traffic going to be going out of Revere and East Boston? You know,
They're going up like that.
and they're going up quick, right?
Yeah.
Revere Beach, development up and down the
Yep.
beach, right? Going up quick, like you said. We're going to see development around Orion Heights. We're going to almost be stuck here in Winthrop.
Sometimes we are.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be very difficult for us.
Don't leave Winthrop today.
Right,
I see that on
but
Facebook all the time.
they're doing that. They're adding housing. They're adding units.
Right. How many units can we possibly need?
You know something? I would love to say, hey, Revere, can you take our 882 and just account for those in your numbers for us? You know, be a good partner for us, right? But there's housing going up. You see it in Chelsea, Everett, Revere, up and down Route 1. How much more on top of 3A is the expectation here?
Exactly.
So that's a major concern as far as our neighbors go. Okay, Revere, East Boston, if we have to build those 882 units or whatever units they are, we're going to add more cars here too.
Right. And people, which actually brings us to our next slide. There are other costs associated with 882 units, which is not 882 people.
Nope.
That's 882 units suitable for families, which means 3, 4, 5, 6, 10. I'm hoping not ever 10, but could be conservatively 4.
Right.
Right? So 4 times, I'm terrible at math, but 882. We can expect at least 1,000 new students, among other things. So what does that look like?
And so we just opened the doors to our brand new Winthrop Middle High School in 2016, 2017. The state had given us the enrollment number of 970 students. When we reported our numbers this year for enrollment, 2023, 2024, on the Department of Secondary Ed's profile, we're at 1,018 students. And that was at the beginning of the school year, and I'm pretty sure that number has gone up.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're at capacity in a brand new school. Well, if we build, where are these additional students going to go on top of what we already have, right? Are we going to look to build another school?
I think we
that's
need to.
larger, right? It's going to cost us more. Okay, this school here cost us over $80 million. That was in 2016. Costs today have skyrocketed. We're probably looking at over $120 million, right? Because we'd have to increase probably to another story, right? 4 floors to accommodate the additional students. So, you know, who's going to pay for it?
Not the state.
Not the state. The taxpayers. The taxpayers are going to pay for the additional students. They're going to have to pay for additional safety, fire and police, EMT, health services. They're going to have to pay for additional DPW. There are no infrastructure costs that we're going to take them on but there's going to be no help from the state
Right.
on this.
Yeah.
There's no promised money. Okay, so we're in trouble. If
Yeah.
you take this on, it's up to us to fund it.
Yeah. No, exactly. And you just reminded me of something else. I learned this yesterday. In addition to, we've got this list of grants. I think we've gotten a little bit of money from the grants.
Yep.
Minimal, really. We had 1 year where we did the CBD, but otherwise,
Yeah, and that 1 year
couple
was
hundred.
2017.
Yep.
That was $2.5 million.
Right.
Thankfully, we had the Speaker of the House in office representing our community and
Right.
fought for us and got us that money for the infrastructure down. But that was the one time
Right.
in the last 10 years
Right.
that we've received that money, and that was the Mass Works grant.
Exactly. So something I found out recently, so we're on this list. It's a bunch of antiquated laws that basically have us paying into the MBTA for services, which is our bus, doesn't include our ferry.
Mm-hmm.
And do you know how much we've paid for MBTA services over the last 10 years? Over $4 million. It is quite more than what we would have gotten or have ever gotten for these grants that we may or may not be allowed to get anymore as a
Right.
result of not following 3A. So, yeah, super interesting.
I do want to bring up one important fact that I may have missed. Back when the CBD was being rezoned, a group of concerned citizens around Precinct 5, they actually dug up some information. And in 2005, the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs, which is now the
EOHLC.
okay.
You're right.
Right.
It was called something else before, D something.
Right.
4
So
letters.
they actually stated that the town of Winthrop was deemed built out, and there was only 3 acres of available green space for any new development. So that meant that any new projects that would come down the line would have to be redevelopment of what was already there. So Winthrop can't accommodate
Right.
any new development. It would actually have to be, hey, we have this piece of property here, and we have to redevelop it. And Winthrop's, like I've said at the beginning of the show, we've been doing it.
Right.
And I think that's an important fact. There is no green space.
There's no
We
green
can't build
space.
another new school. It'd have to go over something else.
Yeah.
You know, we have to look at those impacts of where we are today.
Exactly. And there are more than just monetary costs. So if we go to the next slide quickly, to complying to 3A. I did have the occasion to look at the Salem compliance letter, and
Very interesting letter.
A very interesting letter, and there's more than just Salem who has complied. There's Lexington and a few other towns that are online. But reading it through the first time honestly made me feel ill. It felt like they had signed their life away, truly. In effect, they have given over, their 3A district to the EOHLC to really oversee going forward. Anything, now that Salem has complied, this very historic town is a nationally renowned historic town in Massachusetts. Now that they have complied, anything that they want to do in this district has to be okayed by the state.
So strict oversight.
Strict oversight. If, Salem's actually very good at recognizing their historic landmarks, unlike Winthrop. We're a little bit behind in that regard. But if we discovered that a building or any landmark in a designated 3A district was historic, unfortunately, if we then designated that building as historic, one of two things would happen. Either the state would say that we were out of compliance, or we would have to expand our 3A district. If the state says we're out of compliance, we can be subject to losing grant money, having our grant money yanked, or we can be sued, because that's exactly what's happening to Milton.
Right.
So when
but
you're
the
at
people's voice, they said this is not going to work for us, and a punishment from the Attorney General is we're going to sue you.
right, exactly right, based on a democratic election, not a crime.
Right.
A democratic election.
But you bring up a good point. That control is now in that 3A zone. It is now controlled by the state. Any
Exactly.
changes that we want to make have to go through a process.
Exactly right. And there are lots of plans beyond just the zoning and
Right.
the ability to build occupancy, limitless occupancy buildings in those zones. I mean, if you go online and you read what the HLC has planned for those, especially under the housing bill, there's lots more to come once those zoning zones are in place.
That may lead us to something coming down the line
Yeah,
right now.
yeah, and just another quick thing I'll mention is that the state can continue to update those guidelines. So
As they've been.
As they have been, exactly right. And so as they update the guidelines, we would have to follow suit and continue to comply,
And
else
update.
be punished,
Right.
and update, else be punished. But this leads us to my favorite part of the show, Vasili.
Myth busted!
So we came up with this because we see a lot of pro 3A propaganda out there talking about myths and myths of 3A fears and things like that. We have a few myths to bust ourselves. So first myth number one, next slide, Sue. It's just zoning.
It's just
Vasili.
zoning. That's all we keep. That's all we keep
zoning.
hearing. It's just zoning.
You don't have to build.
No.
No,
But
no.
It's been very clear that the governor has made it very clear. The senator has made it that we do actually need to build, right?
Oh, yeah.
If there's a housing crisis, you're going to have to build.
Right.
If they can mandate zoning, what else can they mandate coming down the line, right? So once we
Exactly.
give up our right, and if we do comply with 3A, they mandated zoning. Can they mandate building?
Exactly, and if you go to the next slide, they've actually funded the stuff. They're giving developers money and tax breaks and all kinds of good stuff in order to be able to build exactly where those zones are laid out. We've been told that it is the foundation, it is the catalyst for what comes next. Do you have any, have you ever heard of this 4.1?
Is that the housing bond
yes,
bill?
yep.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah, lots of money going towards these things. So myth busted, it's not just zoning. Yep, all right, so next myth to bust. 3A housing is affordable. So this is sort of a tie-in to the initial myth, right? Because I think that was the original idea, and now you hear it all over the place. You hear our senator talking about it. You hear our governor talking about it. This is supposed to be for affordable housing.
Yep.
Oh my gosh,
But
it's the opposite.
Is there actually any affordable?
No.
Is there any affordability in this law?
Oh my gosh, no. It's the absolute opposite. If you go to the next slide, I'll explain why that is. So in these 3A apartment buildings, which is what they are, they're not multifamilies like you think of today, the town is allowed to require up to 10% affordable. Today, we can require as much affordable housing as we want. And I think actually through these conversations with our residents, we've learned that that could be a need here that we need to address. Our hands would be completely tied under 3A. We would only be allowed to require up to 10% affordable, but here's the kicker. That 10% is not affordable. In fact, in order to qualify for that 10%, 3A requires that you make 80% of the median income here in Winthrop, which is $70,000 a year. So unless you make $70,000 a year, you can't go into the 3A affordable units. And again, that's an option. So if the town were to require that 10% of the units in those 3A apartment buildings be affordable, unless you make $70,000 a year, you don't qualify. These aren't low income.
Wow.
Okay. Here's another interesting piece. So 40B is out there, right? 40B is already upon us. 40B requires the town to have 20% affordable units. 40B's definition of affordability is 80% of the median income or less.
Wow.
And here's what happens when you go under that 80% of affordability requirement under 40B. That triggers a clause that allows developers to come in and preempt our zoning laws, much like 3A. So it's this very vicious circle. The fact that these 3A apartment buildings are essentially bulk, right, means that they're going to take up a big chunk of the new housing that we have here. If they're not allowed to be affordable, we're going to be out of compliance with 40B, which then triggers a new wave of developers who are allowed to come in and preempt our laws and build what they want outside of our zoning code.
Wow, very interesting.
Very interesting. So, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, affordability, or density rather, doesn't lead to affordability. I put this slide up here because New York City is the densest city in America. As you can see by the graphic here, is by no means affordable. The second most dense city in America, San Francisco, also not affordable, and the third is Boston.
Now, Diane, after reading the law, the affordability piece, why did they take affordability out of? Why did they take it out of the actual law itself? Because I think this is mind-blowing, to be honest with you.
So it is actually in the law. It states why the affordability piece was restricted in this way, and it said that if a town has excessive affordability, it makes it economically infeasible to develop, to build. So when they say it's just zoning, absolutely not. This is entirely meant to create a buildable space for a very well-funded group of developers who've been able to take advantage of this $4.1 billion housing
I'm just going to quote it quickly. So under the affordability requirements, if affordability requirements are excessive, however, they can make it economically infeasible to construct new multifamily housing.
There you have it.
It's right in the law.
It's right in the law. It says that. Very open about it.
So can we call this myth?
It's busted. It's busted. It's not affordable housing. So, and I think that's all we have for today. We hope to see you all again soon, and maybe next time we'll have some special guests as well.
Yes, and please visit us on Facebook. Winthrop Says No to 3A. We share a lot of facts, a lot of data. We want you to also share your concerns with complying with 3A. Please start using our hashtag Winthrop Says No to 3A. You can also email us at winthrop-says-no-to-3a@gmail.com. Thank you, Town of Winthrop. We really hope you tune in again, and we do appreciate it.
Thanks, Winthrop.